Welcome to the Rogue Painter. My name's Chris and I'm a beginner Warhammer 40k painter, but recently I decided to take up a pretty massive project, and over the last couple weeks, as you'll see in this video, I've finished this, my entry for a painting competition at my friendly local game store in the small diorama category. So I'm going to take you through exactly how I did this, my first ever diorama, and only the second model I've actually painted to total completion. No cap. If you haven't seen the first two videos in the series though, I would think it'd be pretty important that you check them out first for context and get to know a little bit more about how the project came to be and what my vision was for it prior to finishing it. Anyway, those videos will be linked down in the video description because we're going to get straight into it. So yeah, first up we're dry brushing the cork and texture paste again, because the first time it didn't come out anywhere near as bright as I thought it would be. I just found out that paint usually dries darker than it looks. And in this case in particular, I needed to go a lot more aggressive with my, bringing up the tone of the gray for the stone. So here we are mixing in off-white and white to bring up the layers of the dry brushing, trying to leave a little bit less paint and catch a little bit less of the surface each time. And obviously I'm doing a wash here all over everything with Agrax Earthshade as well. I can't remember if I actually finished it here or if I needed to go back and apply more highlights, but we'll find out soon. The next step was to clean up the mess I made over the black panels and bodysuit. I'm getting better, I think, at not cleaning up things as I go, because I quite often end up going around in circles because I clean up every bit of mistake that I leave, one color at a time, and realistically I should, wait until later on and then do it all at once. So here I'm applying a bit of pre-shading with some Phoenician purple, just something I thought I'd try, and then painting Emperor's Children over the pink parts. Pretty much copying the box art as I mentioned in the first video. I didn't quite like it, so I mixed in a bit of pink horror, just a tiny bit, and went over it again. Using purple as the base coat for this demonic mutated flesh, and then going over this with Rakarth flesh, leaving 20% of it showing still underneath, and doing some sort of translucent layers of Rakarth flesh so that it doesn't completely cover, going back over and putting more Rakarth flesh in the middle of the muscle bellies and stuff where I want them to be more opaque. Really just winging this though, and then I went in, I mixed in some black into the purple and made the carapace, the shell parts of the claw arm thing a little bit darker. And then Carroburg Crimson Wash in all the creases and crevices to make it look a little bit, bloody and gross. Reikland Flesh Aid over the Rakarth flesh on the flayed skin. And then we go to the cape, because I realized that the back of the cape was actually a lot more in shadow than I thought it would be. I don't know how I didn't understand that at the beginning. So we mixed in some black into the green blues and did a very dark green blue. So yeah, here I am going in with that mix of pink horror and Emperor's Children to go over the majority of the pink armor panels to just make the mid-tone a bit darker. And then I did go over more selective areas like the sharp edges with straight Emperor's Children again to start bringing up a little bit of a highlight. Just trying to catch the areas that would be facing the light, I guess, the most, and the raised curved edges and the sharp edges. Then we started to bring up the pink further, so a little bit of the off-white with the Emperor's Children pink. And this one was pretty much just edge highlighting. I did do some different shapes, like here on the backpack, I'm sort of following the conical shape and doing circles and the round spherical bit. This ended up working out okay actually, volumetric highlighting, something I've been kind of shitting myself about, but it's not always as bad as I guess as it sounds. But yeah, going in lighter and lighter with off-white here as well, eventually working up to just off-white. and going back in and tidying up some of the crimson shading that we left on the mutated claw. And yeah, as I thought, the dry brushing was certainly not done, so I mixed a bit of brown, a bit of grey, a bit of off-white, I don't know, just making it up at this point, and dry brushed it onto the base, which I'd already dry brushed and washed. So I'm basically just going over it all again. And then, when I was happy with that, I went over with one more wash of Agrax Earthshade, watered down because it was looking a bit thick and clumpy. I think it was because the lid wasn't shut properly. And then, even though I think you're meant to usually finish it after you do the wash, I decided to do one final highlight, a little bit lighter, over the wash. And I left it at that, and I think it looked pretty good. Better than it did before, at least. A lot of the metallic elements were lead belcher, and some of them Rune Lord brass. I find metallic paints really hard to use. Like, they kind of have good coverage, but they also get this weird like texture. I don't know, I'm not a big fan. If you guys have some suggestions about different brands of metallic paints to use, I'd be more than happy to give them a try. Then I did a Druchii Violet shade over all those metallic parts, except for a couple of them, which I used Nuln Oil on. But yeah, the Druchii Violet over metallics for Slaanesh. Chef's kiss. Then I had to go clean up some bits. I did white on the coils and like the grills of the plasma gun, and on the tassels of the cloak. Apologies for getting my head in the way. I tried a different filming angle here and I stuffed up so many clips. Then I did the Khorne Berserker head, just standard box art, with a bit of a rough stippled painting method that left a bit more black showing through from beneath the red. I decided these bits of the Khorne banner shouldn't actually be metallic, so I decided to make them leather, because it kind of looked like leather with studs through them. So yeah, I repainted quite a lot of that banner with a dark reddish brown that I mixed up, and Nuln Oil over the top. And then time for one of my other least favourite parts, painting bone. I used Wraith Bone, another horrible paint with terrible coverage, doing many thin layers over that before using Skeleton Horde, which I thought looked absolutely horrible at the time, but later managed to save it by going back over the raised areas with Wraith Bone. Then I started to pick out raised surfaces and like sharp edges of metallic elements that I'd already painted and shaded, and reapply the base color. So we're going with the Rune Lord brass over these top edges and the sort of bottom upwards facing edges, and lead belcher a little later on over the other metallic parts. I'm starting to find it easier to paint with like a proper Kolinsky sable brush and do fine details or finer details with the tip of the brush, even if it's not like a really fine brush, as opposed to using like a 5-0 or a 000 brush, except for eyes. They are still a pain in the ass. Anyway, I'm going with my light blue, the Temple Guard blue, watered down and with a little bit of white mixed in to do the plasma coil. I'm trying to leave the middle-most part of the coil white where it should be hottest, and apply more blue paint and more layers to the outer edges so that way it builds up more opacity. Time to glue the remaining bits together. I've obviously put the cape on now. I'm going to stick the mutated arm on, and I can see exactly how it will all look together and make sure I'm not painting over any bits that don't need to be painted. I used a Griff Charger Grey contrast paint to put a little bit of depth and shadow on the tassels, and more Rakarth flesh on the head. This time I decided not to do the purple first. I'd instead use Carroburg Crimson wash, and then reapply some Rakarth flesh over that, catching all the razor surfaces and stuff again. Similarly to the box art, I did purple on the horn sort of things, and then a darkened down purple on the very tips, and kind of wet blended them together and pulled it down the horns a little bit. Then we get on to one of my favorite parts, the fake snows. So I picked this up from the hobby store and just wanted to get stuck in. So sorry, the camera went flat then and I didn't realize this is how it turned out. It's actually pretty easy to apply, and I think it turned out pretty great, even if I do say so for myself. It really sells the whole theme of the diorama. You'll note that I left a little like bit carved out of the snow where the head is, as if the body's been dragged along the snow and like pushed the snow to one side. Anyway, I started to edge highlight the face, just adding a little bit more white to the Rakarth flesh. And then something that was kind of terrifying me, using Eshin Grey to do fine edge highlighting on like the bodysuit and any black sharp edges, including some kind of volumetric highlighting on the black armor. Basically just sketched out some rough shapes that kind of fit the shape of the thing I was painting. They weren't really precise, they weren't really smooth, but they kind of works. I think they're good enough in my opinion. This is definitely something I'll be working more on to practice and to improve, so I'm happy enough with how it turned out. To further highlight the metallic parts, I mixed Runefang steel into the Runelord brass, and just applying a very small amount on the most upwards facing edges and going over some of those really sharp edges to make them pop. And then I would go in with straight Runefang steel and just apply some dot highlights or some really fine edge highlights, covering up less than I did before. Although metallic paints already shine and catch the light, I think the way I've done this really does sell the kind of the direction the light tends to be coming from. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. You can see me using the Runefang steel on the lead belcher parts here too. I'm not gonna lie though, I did kind of struggle with how much paint to have on my brush and how thin to have the paint for these fine edge highlights. Anyway, putting white over the raised edges of the tassels, and the very nerve-wracking part, yet another nerve-wracking part, whiting out the eyes. Actually no, applying white to the dots of the eyes, because the Lord Exultant's got like black eyes with white pupils instead of white with black. I didn't fudge it though, and I think I got it in the first attempt, so hey, pretty happy with that. I decided the arm needed some more layers, and then I did work up some slightly whiter skin with a bit of off-white mixed into the Rakarth flesh. I got the leather parts with Rhinox hide and then highlighted with some Mournfang brown. And then I decided to redo the cloak, not because I wasn't happy with it, although I thought I could do it better, but because well, as you can see here, I did make some mistakes, but yeah, I kind of got metallic paint all over it and left it to dry without noticing, so I had to cover it anyway. Because I'd done so much blending and everything, like I didn't really know how to just cover it up easily, so I just decided to redo basically the whole cape. So anyway, we're going in with the shadows, the bits that would be covered up or kind of behind something, with a dark blue-green mixed with some black. Then we went in with basically just straight blue-green, and the higher pieces, the mid-tones and the highlights had Temple Guard blue, and then a couple shades of Temple Guard blue with off-white mixed in. Then I used some straight off-white just to do little dot highlights, which this time I'm proud to report back I think I did a lot better job with. I didn't go overboard with it, and instead I built up the rest of the highlights a bit better rather than relying on lots of little really light dot highlights. This might be my favourite part of all though. Blood for the Blood God. I tried the Blood for the Blood God technical paint and yeah, it was kind of fun. I tried to make it look as realistic and like pulling and clodding as possible. I put some over his claw, which is his melee weapon of course, which he used to sever the head. And then I figured out I could kind of splatter it with a thick dry brush to show a bit of like arterial spray. And as you notice, I decided not to do the demonette, so I needed to put some other elements in there. So I chucked in some grass tufts that I got off of Temu. They're actually pretty good, to be honest. And then I just used extra thin super glue to lock them in place. And then I got more of the snow texture paste and dabbed a bit over it to make it look like, you know, they've been there a while, obviously. And the snow's gotten onto them and partially covered them over. And yeah, that's a wrap, actually. I decided not to varnish this, and which I was a little bit nervous about because I'm obviously going to be transporting it and the judges are going to have to like handle it and move it around and stuff, but I didn't know how to use spray on varnish, even though I have got some, so I didn't want to test it on this model in particular because it's for a competition. And then I did also think, because the Blood for the Blood God is glossy, I probably would have to reapply some of that over the top of the varnish to make the blood look glossy. A minor thing, but I decided just to play it safe and not to use varnish at all. So yeah, let's have a look at how it turned out. If you've liked this series or you like this video in particular, please make sure you like and subscribe, share it around to tell a friend, whatever. It all helps a ton and I appreciate it heaps. This painting competition has not only helped me level up quite a lot as a beginner painter by, one, finishing a model to completion rather than getting stuck on the same steps, going around in circles and getting overwhelmed or procrastinating and moving on to something else. Two, it's kind of forced me to try new techniques. One, because it's competition, I didn't want to produce an absolute pile of dog poo. And also relating back to point number one, because I actually finished a model and got further than I have basically ever. I was doing steps that I hadn't done before, like edge highlighting, which I haven't really done, and like layering, which I've had very limited experience with. And so all these things are pretty new, and it gave me a good opportunity to knuckle down refining these techniques and figure out the do's and don'ts of them. Three, it just got me out of my comfort zone and gave me a firm deadline to work towards so that I felt more urgency and a bigger need to get this project done rather than me just sort of going through the motions and picking out a little bit of one model here and there, because when I play with my mates, most of our models are unpainted or just primed. And so there's no real sense of urgency. There's no need to push myself and to get out of my comfort zone or to do anything at all. And four, maybe this has already been implied by the other points, but it's given me so much more confidence. I wouldn't say that I've progressed past being a beginner painter just yet, but it makes me feel bloody good. Definitely given me a huge rush of dopamine, and it's a really proud moment. Actually given me a lot more confidence to take on more advanced projects and to knuckle down and make some damn progress on my Slaanesh Chaos Space Marine army. So again, if you've enjoyed this video or this series and you want to support, please make sure you like, subscribe, tell a friend. But most of all, thank you, and thanks to the Hobby Cave for giving me a reason to do this video series and to hold myself accountable. And in turn, I hope it maybe inspires or motivates you to get stuck into your grey pile of potential. Because as I've found throughout this competition, I don't know how many hours I've actually spent on this, maybe like 5, maybe less. All it takes to make some progress is to just sit down for half an hour, an hour every night or once a week, do what's within your means, and you'll be further along than you were yesterday. All right, I'm out of here. See you guys in the next one.